Welcome back, everyone. Time to keep the ball running with Telltale's Walking Dead. We're starting with the short little Michonne spin-off.
Why did they randomly throw in this special when it has nothing to do with the main story?
For the same reason anyone does anything, to make money.
Starting out, we have Oak, a cynical and untrusting old man. He doesn't like that Pete searches for people knowing that they can be dangerous.
Professor Oak put on some pounds since the last time I saw him.
Oak is justified in his thoughts. In the past, he had a good and well-fed community and a canning factory. Then a little girl was taken, so he and a bunch of other people went after her. All of them, besides Oak, died in the end.
The majority of Pete's crew aren't worth a damn, but Telltale went out of their way to give us a bit more depth with Oak, you know? So we would feel bad if he potentially dies in episode 3.
Well, giving Oak a bit more character development worked because I want to put him in B tier. Oak's cynical mindset is one developed by a previous experience. He's rough around the edges, but he's truly a good guy.
Also got to put some respect on Oak's name. If he ends up getting shot by Norma, he'll use his final moments to kick her and save his boy Sadiq.
Oak is definitely the best of Pete's crew. He rides for the homies. He's B tier.
Moving on to the other two members of Pete's group, Sadiq and Berto.
Poor Berto is the only one of the group that is guaranteed to die. Unfortunately, two of Norma's followers get impatient and shoot Berto dead because of what happened at the Monroe community.
Not much is known about Berto, but he does care about the mob jack and its crew, hoping they hold together. But as we all know, the rule of this entire game series is nothing good ever lasts.
Clementine didn't even need to show up for this community to fall.
Then we have Sadiq, whose only real defining trait is not being as cynical as Oak and not being as optimistic as Pete. Bro is a middle-of-the-ground Morrison.
Gotta keep it 100 with you all. Does anyone care about either of these two?
I don't. They have no history and minimal dialogue. The only person I wanted to save was Oak.
I didn't even react when Berto was taken out.
They both go into who cares, and now we get to talk about the captain of the companion, Pete.
I don't get how this guy can be such a bright-eyed optimist this far into the apocalypse and still be alive somehow.
Just because he's an optimist doesn't mean Pete is dumb. He proves himself to be a fairly competent partner, and he's actually got his head on straight, unlike most of your allies in these games.
Must be something with characters named Pete and being pretty decent side characters.
Pete is a pretty good guy. He stops Michonne from self-terminating and welcomes her onto the companion when there wasn't really any reason to. So we'll stick him in B tier, and now we're moving on to some pretty uninteresting characters, starting with Greg, brother of Samantha.
The only thing I remember about this kid is that he pissed himself when Randall had a gun to his head.
Like you'd be any different in that situation?
I'd hold it together like a man.
Greg might be a coward, but he did ultimately give up his own life for his sister. He steps in front of her and is shot by Zachary.
We then have to bash his skull in after he turns, and that's the end of Greg.
Greg actually got lucky. Had he been around longer, I probably would have grown to hate him like I do Sam. So put Greg in C tier.
We're on the same page, Donald, because I can't stand Samantha either.
Come on now, Samantha isn't that bad. It's true she can be a bit annoying, but she steps up when it counts by taking a bullet for Michonne. Plus, her entire motivation for everything is to keep her family safe.
That's nice and all, Joe, but I don't appreciate Sam deliberately wrapping Michonne and Pete up in hers and Greg's theft from Norma, and lies about it to the detriment of others.
Plus, she's dumb as shit. She stole from Norma once, got caught, then she went and did it again. And while I'm always up for a little violence, you gotta be smart about it. Sam's entire plan for everything is to fight and kill.
Seriously, she wanted us to just kill Randall when we captured him, even though he was a good source of information and a viable bargaining chip.
I'll defend Sam on that. Randall just got done killing her father. Also, despite all the problems, Sam is a good sister to her younger brothers, and she comes back to save Michonne if you stay inside the burning house with the hallucinations of her daughters, even though this gets her killed.
I suppose that's fair, Joe. Why don't we agree to put Sam in C tier?
I find her too annoying for C tier personally. She's a fat F tier.
Sam is far from the worst character in the series. I want her higher, but I'm not going to argue with C tier.
Wonderful. Now we've got the residents of the isolated house Michonne reaches in episode 2. These are the rest of Sam's family and her good friend Paige.
Let's be honest, most of these four aren't worth much consideration. James and Alex are just innocent kids, though they are well behaved.
I respect the older brother for wanting to defend the house and his family, and he understands that he may not be ready to use a gun. The younger brother is pretty sympathetic. He hides in the closet while listening to a music box to cope with the apocalypse.
Pillow forts are always a plus in my book. Both of the boys should go into C tier.
As for their father, well, he's a bit of an idiot.
Bro dies because he opened the gate to his house to throw out a walker arm. Instead of just, throwing it over the top, he then gets promptly blasted by Randall.
I don't really care about the old man, so he goes in who cares. Lastly, we have Paige, the young lady who's been living with the Fairbanks.
Paige seems to be the only one of this group who is a survivor. She is actually level-headed instead of dealing with Norma. Paige chooses to cut and run to avoid the trouble altogether.
More like she's just a yellow-bellied coward. All the level-headedness doesn't count for shit if you don't take a stand when it matters.
Paige does end up sticking around, which is good because she's a crack shot with her rifle, putting Paige in C tier, and now we finally move on to our antagonist, beginning with Randall.
Randall is the complete opposite of level-headed. It's a wonder how this moron is even alive this far into the apocalypse.
Randall's a decent villain. He knows how to get under a person's skin. He immediately finds Michonne's soft spot by poking at her missing kids.
Unfortunately, Randall is just too dumb to live. First, he leaves his own safe zone looking for revenge without telling Norma, which results in the death of his men and his own capture and potential death. Then if Michonne tries to return him to Norma alive, this idiot will turn around and rush you, which results in him being killed by Michonne or Sam anyway.
Bro isn't just evil, he's an evil dumbass. Put him in F tier.
Agreed. I have no respect for villains who are all ketchup and no mustard.
Now we move on to Norma, the big bad herself.
Now there's a woman who knows how to get shit done.
Norma is actually a pretty damn good antagonist. She's like a better and more complex version of Carver. Don't get me wrong, Norma is evil, but only as much as she needs to be.
Norma reins in Randall when he goes too far beating Greg, and she seems to truly want what's best for her community. When Randall is captured, the only thing she's concerned with is getting him back and no vengeance.
Which does seem to be genuine because she only orders an attack after Randall is killed or confirmed to be a walker.
Personally, I like Norma. She seems like a woman who was hardened by the apocalypse, but not so much that she lost her humanity, like Carver or Joan from season 3. Put her in B tier.
Norma definitely didn't deserve the death she got at the end of episode 3. Getting disemboweled by walkers is pretty crazy, which is why I always mercy kill her. Definitely B tier.
Finally, we end the Michonne series off with the character herself. I'll be honest, I don't know a whole lot about Michonne as it relates to her role in the overall Walking Dead franchise. But even without that context, she's a well-written protagonist.
First of all, Michonne is a badass using a machete to slice walkers apart. Sick as f***, she's not afraid to get in there and tear things apart.
Apparently, she used to have a katana but left it behind somewhere.
Oh my God, she's so goddamn cool.
Michonne is shown struggling with the trauma of losing her daughters, and this causes her to hallucinate seeing them over the course of the episodes. This resulted in her becoming calm and stoic, but make no mistake, she is easily the best fighter we've seen in the Telltale series.
Michonne's short journey is spent coming to terms with the loss of her daughters and learning to move on.
It's a shame Michonne wasn't tied into the main story with Clementine. I would have loved to see more of her.
I'm sure Michonne throughout the franchise deserves an S or even S+ tier, but within the context of the Telltale games, I believe the best we can give her is an A tier.
Now we can finally get back to the main storyline with a new frontier.
We'll start with some members of the Garcia family, beginning with Mariana.
Let's be honest, we all know Mari is the good one, which is why Telltale decided to have her killed off unceremoniously at the end of Ties That Bind Part 1.
Mari did as she was told. She was polite and talked about writing down everything she can remember so she doesn't forget and lose parts of herself.
Poor girl, all she wanted was a candy bar and batteries for her Walkman. Why didn't they shoot Gabe instead?
As much as I'd like to give Mariana a higher ranking, she dies too early on, but she was a decent kid who definitely deserves a solid C tier.
Now we get to talk about that annoying little rat, Gabe.
I'll stand up for Gabe. He's not that bad.
First of all, the boy is disobedient as fuck. Then he rats you out if you kill Conrad in episode 4. This is despite Javier doing it to save both him and Clementine. If you don't shoot Conrad, Gabe will criticize you for being a coward. There's no winning with this kid.
I can understand how Gabe is controversial. His temper gets him into enough trouble, and he definitely takes after his father in many regards. However, the boy wants to do good, especially after Mariana is killed in front of his own eyes. Gabe struggles with not being able to stand by Kate when she's shot and wants to help David when he's sliding off the deep end.
Of all the troublemaking kids we've seen in the series thus far, Gabe is far from the worst of them. And he's actually got good development if things go well for him. Gabe wants to be a real man like his father, but when he sees David for what he really is, he realizes that Javier is the man he wants to become.
Gabe makes way too many mistakes, from rushing an enemy too soon and getting Javi stabbed to going with David, even though he knows his dad is no good by this point.
Gabe is remorseful when he gets Javi stabbed, and he does still pull his own weight outside of that.
Overall, Gabe is probably one of the better written characters of the season in spite of his annoying tendencies. He makes plenty of mistakes, but actually tries to make good on them. Hot takes, but I want to put Gabe in A tier.
Okay, whoa now. We are not putting that little shitbird in the same tier as Chuck. Mistakes after mistakes with this kid, and the only reason I don't think he should go to F tier is because the only person he actually kills with his dumbass decisions is himself.
Gabriel makes a lot of mistakes, but what makes him different from a guy like Ben is his desire to be better. Gabe will grow into a better guy if you let him, and considering he's just a kid, that's a chance he certainly has.
Gabe's death is definitely one of the saddest things because I believe the kid had potential. He deserves A tier.
This is insanity. Dumbest take I've heard from you two in a while.
We're putting Gabe in A tier. He's a great character. Next up, we have Kate Garcia, the stepmom to both the kids. This is where I'm probably at odds with the majority of people because I'm not all too fond of Kate.
How on earth could you have a bone to pick with Kate? She's a perfectly nice character and great love interest to Javier.
Well, aside from the fact that she spends most of the season out of commission because she gets shot in the stomach, what scenes she does have are unbearable. She gets pissed with Javi if he defends her against David in the episode 2 flashback, spends the entire time wanting to leave Richmond when she's still too weak to move, and then suddenly, when it is time to leave, she wants to stay.
Come on, Barack. Kate wants to stay because she's the one who blew up the walls and let walkers in.
I'm with Barack here. I'm not going to pretend I like David or anything, but Kate has absolutely no care in her heart for David at all. And to make matters worse, she doesn't care if Javier is happy to see his brother after years of separation.
Then she has the nerve to tell Javier not to care about David's death, despite everything that's happened between them. That's still his brother, the only member of immediate family that he has left.
Hell hath no fury like a woman's scorn. If Javier returns Kate's feelings, she will kiss you in front of David to deliberately piss him off when they're trying to save Richmond. And if you turn her down, she says she can't believe she fell for either of them.
Lastly, if Gabe happens to die, Kate will stupidly suggest starting a new family when Javier is still grieving over his nephew and brother.
This is why I, in a rare moment, ship Javier together with Jesus. The chemistry there is oozing.
Okay, counter-argument, Kate smokes weed.
Not with all that fucking coughing she was doing in episode 1.
Not gonna lie, I want to put Kate in D tier because I find her intolerable. But I think that's my bias shining through. For the most part, she's a decent woman. She cares about the kids and would be a decent partner to Javier. Plus, her concerns with David were somewhat valid. So how about C tier?
I cannot believe we're putting Kate that low. Y'all are some incels.
Joe, stay the fuck off Twitter. The terminology is infecting what few brain cells you have left.
It's actually called X now, Donald.
Barack, move on to the next character before I say something I won't be able to take back.
On to some villains now. We have Badger, the bastard who killed Mariana and killed Conrad's wife, Francine.
Shouldn't be much debate here. This guy is a piece of shit.
Badger is a true lunatic. Even while bleeding out from getting shot in the gut, he gloats about killing Mari to Javi's face and killing Francine to Conrad's.
To thank Badger for his kind words, I give him the same beating he deserves. And he also deserves to go into I'd rather be with the Walkers. Up next is Badger's buddy Max.
Max is a slightly better man, and I mean slightly as literally as possible. He does seem to take issue with Badger setting walkers upon the Prescott community, and he didn't like that Badger shot Mariana dead.
Max will come in clutch if you spare him in episode 3. He'll testify against Joan and prove she's been raiding other communities for supplies.
Too bad that's not saving him from F tier. Being reasonable doesn't mean much when you actively partake in destroying other settlements.
The last major member of this group is Lonnie.
Who's that?
Someone barely important enough to even make this tier list at all. Put him in Who Cares.
Up next, we've got Trip. He was the leader of Prescott before it was destroyed.
Decent guy. Trip is reasonable if you tell him the truth about Clementine accidentally killing the guy who ripped her off and gives you a ride back to the junkyard out of the goodness of his heart.
Trip becomes a lot more confrontational as things go on. But that is understandable when his entire community is wiped out, and one of his best friends is potentially killed within a few days.
Plus, he gets rejected by Eleanor.
That confession and Tripp's reaction to it were pretty cringe, not gonna lie.
Well, Trip definitely got lucky because Eleanor isn't worth it. We'll put Trip in B tier, I think, and head off to his ex.
Drop that snake Eleanor in F tier where she belongs.
I don't even have a defense for this. To be honest, Eleanor is one of the biggest reasons things fall apart in episode 4. By selling out the group to Joan, she gets Ava and Trip captured.
No wonder Clementine said she trusted Trip more than Eleanor. But for real, though, I've never seen a bigger hypocrite in my life.
Considering our line of work, Barry, that's a pretty damning statement.
She blames Javi for Trip's death even though you were trying to save him over Ava, when she was the one who caused that situation in the first place.
Triaging a bad situation, my ass.
Following Eleanor, who is going to F tier. We have another Prescott survivor, Conrad.
Don't tell me Conrad Werner found his way into this game.
No, this Conrad is actually a good character when we're not memeing.
All I remember about this guy is him taking Gabe hostage so he can use Clementine as a bargaining chip.
Oh, right, him. I shoot him dead every time, so F tier.
Hold up, you boys need to go back and spare Conrad. He's actually a pretty good character, which is odd given that he's determinate. Conrad can potentially die in episode 2, 3, and 4 of the season, but if he pulls through, you'll possibly see him get revenge on Badger where he drops one of the coldest lines of the series. Plus, Conrad makes a big, heroic return by saving Javier when Richmond starts falling apart. I say we drop Conrad in B tier.
Fine by me, the bald brother can go to B tier.
Next we have Paul Monroe, but his friends call him Jesus.
Why did this guy sound familiar?
His voice actor is Brandon Keener. You might know him as our boy Garrus Vakarian.
Put him in S tier, W character, and W voice actor.
I want to argue on the basis that he sounds like Garrus, but Jesus is a badass. Dude is out here doing roundhouse kicks on walkers.
To offer a little pushback here, Jesus is extremely judgmental of everything Javier does. When David arrives at the hideout in episode 3, Jesus will not be pleased if you don't open the door for him, mind you. Clementine has a gun drawn on Javi here.
Jesus leaves in episode 3, but he makes a heroic comeback in episode 5 on some knight in shining armor.
I think the S tier is a bit high, but Bro definitely gets a clear A tier. He reminds Javier to do the right thing when he becomes the leader of Richmond and believes in him to lead change going forward. On to some new frontier people. We'll start with David's second-in-command, Ava.
Look me dead in the eyes and tell me this woman isn't bald.
Learn the difference between a buzz cut and being bald, Donald? Ava's hair is perfect, impossible to get grabbed.
Yeah, it can't get grabbed because there ain't shit there.
Ava comes off as a hard-ass soldier type, but in reality, she's a pretty kind individual. She meets Clem in an abandoned trailer while she is running from walkers and invites her to join the new frontier. However, when Clementine gets kicked out, the one to come check on her is Ava, bringing her some supplies and advising Clementine to go out to seek help and not to overestimate herself.
I'll also admit that Ava is a badass, despite being like half the size she casually one-shots Trip when he tries to attack her.
Ava's death is pretty anticlimactic if you survive the encounter with Joan. She gets jumped by a walker that is hiding in a car and falls to her death. Trip got a better send-off.
Put Ava in A tier. She's a great mix of strength and compassion. It's no wonder David made her his lieutenant. She's insanely capable.
I actually agree. Evidently, Ava traded her hair for some insane punching power like she's Saitama.
A tier for Ava it is, and now we move to the Elite Four of the new frontier, starting with Dr. Lingard.
Dr. Lingard suffers from a drug addiction, and it's thanks to David he got back on his feet at all, which is why it's no surprise that the good doctor falls apart as soon as he finds out David will be executed.
Having said that, Lingard admits to being fully in line with the evil actions of the new frontier, even if it does take a toll on his mental health.
Lingard is exactly the kind of doctor that makes people avoid them. He minces no words when telling Clementine that AJ is going to die and puts Clem in a situation where she needs to kill him via drug overdose in order to get information on AJ.
Of the big villains in A New Frontier, Lingard is at least somewhat sympathetic, so with that in mind, I think he can at least go into D tier.
Next up is Clint, and this guy's an even bigger pushover than Joe is.
Don't compare me to that guy. I never would have bowed to Joan so easily.
Admittedly, Clint is about the only member of the Elite Four that is actually sane, which makes his actions all the more annoying. Clint kicks Javier and his group out of Richmond even after being told that Badger and Max killed Mariana and destroyed Prescott. Then he sides with Joan even after all her crimes are revealed, and then he does absolutely nothing to prevent the murder of Ava or Trip.
Clint really waited until after someone died to say they don't murder in Richmond.
Clint will potentially be killed by David if Javi doesn't shoot Joan, otherwise he runs off and is never heard from again. F-tier character, I'm not even sure if he's a villain or not. He's just a milquetoast character.
Time for the big bad herself, Joan, the actual leader of the new frontier.
She's on the same tier as Carver for sheer evil. Raiding numerous settlements and killing hundreds of people is crazy, even if it was for the people of Richmond. After a certain point, you're just doing too much.
Not to mention that Joan is an even bigger snake than Eleanor. When she prompts you to choose between Ava and Trip, she goes and kills the person you did want to save.
Joan also never gets her own hands dirty. She's never even seen using a gun. I'm pretty sure she never expected it if Javi chooses to shoot her dead instead of taking Clint's offer.
To offer a little defense for Joan, she started this whole raiding business because of a really bad winter where tons of people in Richmond died due to lacking supplies. However, it becomes clear she's doing things in excess, and with that in mind, she goes to F tier. Now we move on to probably the most controversial character in the series, David Garcia.
In my opinion, any good that comes out about David is overshadowed by the bad. Bro is possessive and jealous towards Kate. He tries to kill Javier because of it in episode 5, and then runs off and potentially gets himself and Gabe killed. No wonder Gabe has so many problems. That behavior must be hereditary.
David is an amazing character. In fact, he's pretty similar to Kenny. Both of them have flaws, but ultimately want what's best for their families and the people around them. When David reunites with Javi, he immediately gets Kate medical attention and gets Javi out of confinement.
You're both speaking facts. The man is clearly problematic towards Kate, and he is abusive towards his brother. Hell, the first thing we see him do is punch Javi out for not being there when their father died. However, David wanted nothing more than everyone to be safe, and that bears itself in his final moments when he's dying. David tells Javi and Gabe to take care of each other and says he loves both his kids and his brother.
All that is well and good, but taking AJ away from Clementine was a step too far.
The hell was Clementine going to do with a sick AJ all by herself anyway? Plus, David took care of the kid for a little while before sending him to the McCarroll Ranch where he would be safer. On top of that, David is the one who okayed Ava delivering some supplies to Clem. He clearly didn't want her to die out there.
And as bad as David is, he's the only one of the Elite Four that doesn't kneel to Joan and fights back against her. When David survives the events of the season, he will want to leave the New Frontier. But you can convince him to stay to atone for his wrongs by rebuilding Richmond. We never find out how that goes, though.
David, just like Kenny, is a well-written, flawed character and should clearly go in S tier.
David, over the likes of Chuck and Michonne, is wild. He's B tier at best.
I say he gets an A tier. Telltale was in their bag when they wrote David. I like him a lot more than Kate, and he's less insufferable than Gabe. David's relationship with Javier is compelling, especially when you go the brothers route with him.
David in A tier and Kate in C is insane.
Maybe Kate should try being more enjoyable. We're moving on to our protagonist for the season, Javier Garcia.
Before the apocalypse, Javi was a baseball player who bet on his own games. Personally, I don't see why that cost him his place in the league.
I'm pretty sure betting on yourself is wildly unethical.
Javi's only mistake was getting caught.
We also see Javi be absent during the time of his father's death. Even though the rest of his family was there, however, after the apocalypse, Javi grows into a responsible and capable survivor. One of the best in the series, if we're being honest.
Very true. Seeing Javi step up for a family that technically isn't even his and making it his own makes him a great character and underlines the importance of finding family where you can. His relationship with David, on the other hand, shows there are limits to your blood ties. You can choose to be brotherly to David, but there comes a time where you may need to forsake him for the greater good.
That time is around the time David starts trying to choke Javi to death with a giant wrench. Thankfully, Clementine is there to break it up.
Javier's character development culminates in him stepping up to lead Richmond down a new and hopefully better path, regardless of who's alive at the end of the season.
Though some of the dialogue in Season 4 tells us things may not be all sunshine and rainbows for the New Frontier.
My only complaint with Javier is we meet him near the end of his character journey, rather than at the beginning of it. It would have been great to see the struggles he had to overcome at the beginning of the apocalypse.
Javier is still a great protagonist like Lee and Michonne before him, and deserves that S-tier spot we've had open for a while. He's good, but he doesn't go even further beyond like Kenny and Lee.
Agreed, Javier goes in S-tier, and that concludes Season 3's characters. Next time we'll cover the final season, where we'll finally get to talk about Clementine. Until then, keep hydrated and don't forget to sleep.